We've all seen and probably found the classic arrowhead and spear forms. The collection here, though, that I'm going to show you is different. The pieces I'm about to show you are all arrowheads, in the truest sense of the word. Sadly, however, most collectors and a good number of archaeologists would not recognize these out in the field, and still might not when they're gathered and examined. On April 2nd of this year, my friend Gil Alberg and I set out looking for artifacts at a site where we have often visited. And Gil found a nicely made triangular point, and I found a really nice notched late woodland arrowhead. Both are typical, well-known styles. Now, we both picked up all the flakes that we saw also, so I could examine them more closely at home, and altogether, in that gathering of probably about 100 flakes, there were 6 rather crudely made arrowheads, which had been fashioned from waste flint. This is not really surprising when you consider how frugal the Native American people were with the commodities that Gitche-Manitou, the great creator spirit, had placed all around them. None of these points exceed 1 inch. Most were considerably smaller. They were mostly worked on one side only, and most displayed no form of a notch or stem for hefting. But while this made securing the arrowhead to the shaft a little more difficult, notches and a stem are not totally required to put it onto a shaft. They did not have to be as cautious about losing these crudely made small points, as their time investment in fashioning them was near nothing, maybe only seconds. In all, the archaeological journals that I have looked at over the years, I've never seen a study on this kind of projectile point. Even in publications aimed just at the collectors, I've never seen a feature detailing these forms. The production of arrowheads and spearheads and other devices made of flint leave thousands of these small flakes just laying around, and most of them are usable because they're razor sharp. One time, when I was doing work at my old Vanetton Creek site in Oscoda, Michigan, I came across a curious image frozen in time. I was excavating a site where arrows and spears had been produced, and I cleared away the roots and the dirt carefully, and there was the outline of a man's backside and crossed legs on the ground. He was outlined by the flakes that had fallen all around him as he worked. And make no mistake about it, the waste material was still very, very sharp after all their centuries in the ground. I had so many lacerations on my hands from working that site that I was forced to begin wearing leather gloves to prevent further blood loss. Now, at this point, let's examine the curious little projectile points that Gil and I found that on that very, very warm April 2nd day, which, by the way, was my birthday. We found a total of 9 arrowheads, 7 of which were the utilized flake points, the subject of this documentary. But before I show these points to you and describe them, let me share with you a very good question that I was recently asked, and that is, if the Indians producing tools from flint had thousands of flakes around them as waste product that could be used as arrows, why did they bother making the sometimes complex notched points and stemmed points that they did? That is a very good question, of which there is no concrete answer. Perhaps these more primitive points were used by their young people in training to be future hunters. I don't know, that's a possibility. Or maybe they were made by the youngsters learning the craft of knapping flint. Some were likely never intended to fly, though, through the air on a shaft. Many were quite likely hefted to a long shaft and used by hand to spear fish, frogs, and other food commodities, which did not require being hunted with a bow. One thing we can be sure of is that they served a very particular use, as the Native Americans who occupied Michigan and the Great Lakes in general were very practical people. Okay, let's take a look at the points. Number 1 is light gray and measures about a hair under 1.25 inches. This is retouched on one side only, that is pressure flaked. It is very thin, which would make it easy to affix to a wooden shaft for spearing fish purposes or frogs perhaps. And there are 2 areas of pressure flaking on the front, but the reverse side is completely smooth, left exactly as it was when it was taken off the item that was being worked on. Number 2 is a mottled, light and black gray, and measures about 1.25 inches again. This resembles a crude triangular point, which thins at the base, making attachment to a shaft much easier to facilitate. The front shows that 4 flakes had been removed in its production. The back, as with the other number 1, is completely smooth and shows no production marks and no pressure flaking that would have been used to sharpen the point. It was sharp enough without touching it up, in other words. Now, number 3 is a sort of double triangle, making one at the top and one at the bottom. The front shows lots of work. There are several areas of pressure flaking and perhaps the removal of 5 flakes in its production. The reverse shows as much work as the front, indicating this was given a lot of thought in its production. It was not just a cast-off that was picked up. They worked on it a little bit. In other words, as I just said, it was not just a cast-off. It is also thicker than the others, but still would be fairly easy to attach to a shaft. This measures a tad more than 1.25 inches. Now, number 4, this is a nice piece, or it's a triangular form. One edge is straight and thick. While this is likely a small spear point, that straight edge could also indicate that it was used as a knife. The other edge flares out uniquely. There is a notch on the base where it would have been attached to a shaft. On the reverse, you can see the concentric rings on the lower right, indicating that this was made from nodular chert. The front shows one minor area of pressure flaking on the left, and the reverse shows the removal of 4 flakes. And now number 5, I believe this is a broken arrowhead that was pressed into service by slight modification. On the right side of the base is a nice notch, and there would have been a matching one on the left had it not been broken off. On the left, midway and up to the tip was broken off. It would have with the notches, it would have made this a typical late woodland notched point. As is the break forms a crude point, the break forms a crude point at the tip, making this still an effective point, even though broken. A lot of times, when a point was broken, they refurbished it. The front shows the removal of 3 flakes in its production, and the reverse is smooth, showing that there was no modification at all. Number 6, now this is a nice little stemmed piece, and it is very little, under 1 inch. Stems were an alternate method of attachment to a shaft, which does not employ notches, and this measures 1 inch in length and is made of a medium dark gray chert. Now this has a profound dorsal ridge running down the center of it and a very small flute where a shaft would be attached. Flutes were used extensively in the archaic periods, and I'm not suggesting this is archaic, although it could be older than the woodland periods. There's just no way to say for sure. On the front, upper right, is a small patch of pressure flaking, and it appears that 3 flakes were removed from the front, and that the reverse is completely smooth and had no work done on it at all. Now, numbers 7 through 9 are all 3. Okay, sorry about that interruption. Let's see, where was I? I'm sorry. Anyway, 7 through 9, all 3 points were purposely made, planned out, not made from cast-off flakes. In fact, number 7 has no flaking at all. It was made by grinding down with another stone. It is black with whitish tan markings. This is called a blunt or a stunner, and it was not meant to kill. Now, as you can see, this is stemmed rather than notched, and in this case, because of how thick it is, it would fit into a socket in the shaft. It couldn't be attached any other way. But what I'm about to say is 100% on speculation. As I mentioned before, this could predate the other pieces by many thousands of years. But then again, it might not. I say this, however, due to its form and the material it is made from, as well as a very unscientific gut feeling. But that feeling has served me well over the 35 years that I've been looking for and studying Native American Indian relics in Michigan. This blunt measures about 1.5 inches long. Now, if it is what I believe it to be, it could date back to the late Archaic period. And a late Archaic site is located across the Shiawassee and Tittabawassee River, not more than 1.5 miles away from where I found this, so my age assessment is not totally out of the question. Now, number 8 is a really nice late woodland triangular point that Gill found. It is interesting to note that this style was originally made in the Archaic period and then stopped in the early woodland, only to be picked up again as a typical style in the late woodland. This point was found by my friend Barry Gill Albert, as I said, and this measures 1 inch long and shows flake removal and pressure flaking on both sides. This is made of a light gray tabular chert, meaning that it was laid out flat instead of concretion in the limestone, a ball-shaped concretion in the limestone. And lastly, we have number 9, which I found, and I think it's really cool. This is side notched and shows pressure flaking all the way around the point on both sides. Very sharp tip. Be just as effective today as the day it was made up to 1,500 years ago. To me, this appears to be made of tabular chert. This measures about 1.25 inches in length. Very nice little late woodland arrowhead. And I get interrupted again. I'm sorry about that. Anyways, that's a brief look at these really interesting arrowheads and spear points that really deserve more attention than they get, which is next to nothing. I would absolutely love to hear your comments. Please be sure to leave them in the section below, and I'll try to answer everyone that comments. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up, please. I'd appreciate that. And don't forget to subscribe, as there are many features here historically on my channel, prehistoric, and just pure entertainment too. There's something for everybody, and there are many, many features planned coming up in the near future. So if you don't want to miss out on any of those, be sure you subscribe. Okay, God bless, and have a great evening.